Okay, guys, welcome. We are excited to be inviting Steve Lassman from Villas of Distinction on this show this week. Welcome, Steve.
Melissa, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Steve, just briefly, how long have you been with Villas of Distinction?
So we actually, the company was started 37 years ago, and we purchased it in 2005. So
Okay,
we've owned it and
wonderful.
we've run it since 2005. So the past 21 years, it's definitely a different company than when we purchased it. We can
Okay.
we can talk about that or not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, let's just kind of start off with you're just understanding a little bit more for our audience, the different types of properties you have, the range of options, where they're at, things like that.
Yeah, well, we're definitely very different than a lot of the mainstream villa companies that out there. But to give you that high level overview, we have just over 3,300 villas. It's a very small curated inventory, and that's on purpose. And I know we might segue into the Airbnbs and the VRBOs of the world, but we're very different philosophy than them. They have 7.5 million homes. We have just over 3,300 homes. We have from a small 1-2 bedroom all the way up to 51 bedrooms. So really size for anyone that's looking for a small group all the way up to that large group. We're in over 60 destinations plus around the globe, all throughout Europe, the Caribbean, Mexico, Central America, a little bit of Southeast Asia, in the United States, and Canada. Everything we do it's more about the experience than the rental, because it's really, what is the experience that the client's looking for? And we obviously can talk more about that. But, from a basic overview, small curated inventory, everything we offer is vetted and inspected, so there's nothing that we haven't seen or doesn't meet our standards. So when you talk about, like Airbnb, there's some big differences there with us. But that's high level, where we're
Yeah.
at.
Okay. Well, I mean, you mentioned Airbnb, and I know that
Yeah.
that's been kind of all the rage for a while now. And so, what would their experience? How would it differ with you guys
So yeah,
versus something like that?
yeah. I mean, we start with the size of the inventory. I mean, over 7.5 million homes, 3,300 plus homes. Everything we offer is vetted, inspected. They don't even hide the fact that they've never stepped foot in a single one of their homes. So it's a very different model. Very curated model versus, hey, we just we'll take anything in our model. That's not to say that they don't offer quality product. I'm not saying they don't, but there's a wide range, so you don't know what you're getting. Versus what you're getting with us. The other thing that I really like to talk about is, again, the experience. We offer that full service concierge. So we work with you, Melissa, as the advisor, trying to get to know what is it that the client is looking to do once they're on vacation. You may have someone that, as an example, we did a 50th birthday party for a young lady, and she took 12 of her friends. And what she wanted was, one night she wanted to have a DJ come in so they could dance. She wanted to have mani-pedis and massages at the villa, so we brought that in. They wanted to do paint and sip. One day they wanted to go out on a sunset cruise. One day they wanted to go to a cenote, for the day. So it's really tailored to what your client is looking for, and it's personalized. Whereas with Airbnb, there really isn't that personalized service. Yes, they offer a small selection of services, and they're adding more of those, but they're usually not personalized. They're usually groups. You're not going by yourself. And the other thing with that, we also vet all of those services as well. So we're not just, if you come to us, Melissa, and say, my client would like to go out on a catamaran cruise for sunset. We don't just Google catamaran cruises in Turks and Caicos. We also vet those products so that we know that what you're getting, is going to be the same quality as what we're offering within the villa world. The other thing that I really like about the difference between us, a travel advisor, and Airbnb is, we are not beholden to a particular homeowner. When you call us based for your client, we're working together to find the perfect villa for the client. When a client is calling, or looking at a home on Airbnb, they're dealing with a homeowner. That homeowner's main reason for being on Airbnb is to fill their calendar. So it may not be in the best interest of the client to actually have that house. Whereas you and I working together, we're looking for the right house that fits the model, for the client. So there's a little bit of a misconnect when someone works directly with a homeowner, because the homeowner is probably more interested in filling their calendar, where the guest is looking to fulfill their need for the vacation. Whereas if when they come to you, we have one goal, and that's to create that, the perfect experience for the guest. So it's a perfect connection versus a kind of a misconnect. The next things that are different are we offer 24/7 customer care and have actual boots on the ground in every destination we sell. When you look at, Airbnb and VRBO, who are they calling if something does go sideways? Are they calling the homeowner? Is the homeowner on site? Is the homeowner, a homeowner who owns a home in Italy? Maybe he lives in Colorado. You just don't know, versus we are there. We have teams on the ground. So you're never alone in a destination. If something was to go, I'm not saying sideways, but things happen, where, maybe something happens at the villa, or maybe there's an emergency with the client. We're there to help that client, from start to finish, as you are. And last but not least, you're spending on average with us, the average transaction, and I don't mean to freak out your audience with a high number, but the average transaction with a travel advisor is $30,000 for a villa. Now, let's take that down, though. That's for an average of 5 bedrooms for an average of 7 nights. So when you're talking about that, you're talking, at about 6,000 per couple, or 3,000 per person per week. So, it's not that $30,000 number. So when you're talking about a vacation that's going to cost, good money, you want to make sure you give it to a company that's, financially sound, whereas versus you're giving it to, a homeowner that you don't know. And I'm going to give you the perfect example of that. A real world example. Back in 2017, I'm going to go back to there. We had 3 hurricanes that ravaged the Caribbean back to back to back to back. If you had booked with anyone but a travel advisor in Villas of Distinction, the answer that everyone received was, do you have travel insurance? If you do, file a claim. We didn't play that game. We actually gave everyone a full credit to travel anywhere in our system, thus protecting your client's vacation. So that's a big difference between a company like ours and a company like Airbnb, where the homeowner had the money and it was up to them whether they wanted to give you that credit to come in a future date, or just say, I'm sorry, if you didn't buy insurance, you've lost your money. So at a high level, that's, kind of the main differences between us and like an Airbnb or a VRBO.
Okay. Well, I mean, as the travel advisor, you said several things that I always really like to hear. And it's, I take it very seriously when I recommend a supplier to a client. And when they come to me with a specific supplier that they are set on, if I have any concerns with that supplier, I'm absolutely going to be honest with them and tell them, here are my concerns. And when I have people on this show, it's because it's, they're people that we have also vetted and that we feel very confident in, and we know they're going to take care of our clients, because why would we want to have people not take great care of our clients? Obviously,
Right.
we want, it's just good business, right? To make sure that we're doing that. And I love so many things that you said there, because you're making sure that not only is the house going to be a great fit, but you're making sure that any of those special details, that you've made sure all of those vendors or suppliers are going to meet their needs as well. So that's wonderful. Okay, so I want to kind of move into group travel, because I think that's a big deal. There's obviously different types of group travel, and outside of what people, I think a lot of people move towards either like a cruise sometimes or an all-inclusive resort. But why should they consider Villas of Distinction?
So, I mean, perfect examples. You talked about a resort, an all-inclusive, or you talked about, the cruise, compared to a villa. So both of those things have one thing in common. You get a room, you have your bathroom, and you're soloed into that room at some point in time, versus, and then you're sharing the public space. So if you want to meet for a drink, or if you want to all go to dinner, you are beholden to, are there seats at the bar? Is the bar open? When can my group of 12 get dinner reservations? Does everybody like this particular restaurant? Whereas in a villa, first off, the bar never closes. The bars do close at resorts and at in all-inclusives. The kitchen never closes in a villa. The pool never closes at a villa. So, it's always available to you. But there are places where you can sit together as a group, and it's just you and your group. So, if you want to sit together and have a glass of wine while you watch the sun go down, you're not fighting with other people for that perfect chair by the swimming pool. Or if the pool is closed and they don't let you sit there, again, it's always open. If you want to dine at 7:00 at night, you dine at 7:00 at night. And every one of our villas, of course, if you have a 6-bedroom villa, which is sized for 12 people, of course, you're going to have a dining room table that's sized for 12 people. And you can eat at 7, you can eat at 5, you can eat whatever time you want, versus, going to a restaurant and they go, well, the only time we can get 12 in is either 5:00 or 8:00, or we might have to split you up into 2 separate tables. So the larger you get, it becomes a little bit more complicated on cruises and on in resorts, because space is limited. They're dealing with thousands of people, where we're only dealing with you. The other beauty is, say you have families that go away with small kids. You can feed the kids earlier at a villa, or say you have really young kids and you want to put them down for a nap, or they need to go to the room to go to sleep. Well, what do you do if you're on a cruise, or what do you do if you're in a resort? Do you leave the child alone in the room, which is far away from wherever the public areas are? Or do you put them in the room that's, literally 25 feet away from the pool in the house, maybe with a baby monitor if you want, and sit by the pool and enjoy your time together? So you have all the comforts of home. You have your living room, you have your dining room, you have your TV room, you have your own private pool. You're never running down. And I hate the cliche, but we know it's true. You're never running down at 8:00 in the morning to get a pool chair, by the cruise ship, because, and I hate to make fun of it, but, I've been on cruises. I know you've been on cruises, Melissa, where you come down at 8:00 and 47 of 50 chairs already have towels on them.
Resorts are the same.
Yeah. You don't have that problem at your villa, because your chairs are your chairs. Again, you're not sharing all of the amenities, together. So it's really good for small to large groups. We talked about, you talked about all inclusive. A lot of times you're paying for things that you might not necessarily be using. So if you have a group of 12 that are going, everyone's paying that price for all the food, all the, the alcohol, etc. Whereas at a villa, you're basing everything on consumption. So if you drink a bottle of rum, you're just paying for that bottle of rum. That's there. It's based on the consumption. If Sally doesn't drink rum, but Sally drinks Prosecco, we have her Prosecco there. So it's definitely much more tailored to the client's wants and needs. The other thing I love about villas, especially staff villas, is when you have people that have dietary needs. So if you are gluten-free, or if you don't eat meats, if you have a chef, whenever you go to a restaurant, because I have an allergy, every time I go to a restaurant, I tell the waitress 2 or 3 times to make sure that whatever I'm ordering doesn't have what I'm allergic to. Whereas when you talk to a chef at a villa, I know, I'll give you an example. I stay at Hacienda Jaguar quite a bit in the Riviera Maya, Mexico. They know me. The chef knows that I can't eat this specific item. When they serve the food at night, they always come, Mr. Steve, this is for you. You cannot have this. This you can have. This you cannot have. They know what allergies I have, which is a great relief when you're staying somewhere that you don't have to constantly think about, did I make sure, did I tell the chef? Did I tell them I can't have this? Am I going to get sick?
Mm-hmm.
You don't make a big deal out of it, but really in the back of your mind, think about that. You don't have to worry about it when you're at the villa. When you're in with a restaurant, you don't know what's going on back in the kitchen. They're serving, 1,000 meals that are coming out.
Right.
And, what if there's I hate to say it, cross-contamination. Sometimes they don't think about that. So it's really good because the villa can really focus on, again, the needs and wants of the clients that are staying there. And talking about that, I know people think about the all-inclusive and the cruise as a more traditional style vacation. But we run the gamut. Villas are great for my favorite one, celebration travel. Celebrating a 50th birthday or a 60th birthday or a 50th wedding anniversary, as I mentioned, the 50th birthday before. There is no better way to celebrate, even a wedding. You think about it, my son was at that age like 3 years ago where everyone was getting married and they were doing these, destination weddings. And he used to make me laugh because he'd say, you should see, there's a beautiful picture of the bride and the groom and then somebody walking behind them with a bathing suit, with the glass in their hand, going, hey, how are you? Whereas, at the villa, it's very private. It's just you and the guests that you came with. So celebration travel is amazing. Guys getaways, girls getaways, because again, you're not in an environment with thousands of other people. You're just there with the people you've chose to travel with. Multi-gen families, fantastic for villa getaways. We talked about weddings, small weddings, all the way up to, we did a wedding again in Riviera Maya, this 151 bedroom estate for 250 people, which was, easy to accomplish. And, most of the people stayed within the villa or off site at another place. But again, it was just at the villa. You're not having it at a resort with thousands of other people watching the event at the same time. But you could also, when you talk about those types, you can also talk about, food and wine experiences, going to Tuscany because you want to experience, truffle hunting or chef classes, or health. We do yoga getaway, yoga trips and health trips. So the imagination just goes, wherever you want within a villa. And again, it's really tailor-made to what the client is looking to do. So kind of went off on a tangent there when you asked me, but hopefully I answered the question.
No. Yeah, you did. And so I did have a couple questions follow up on that. Well, first, a comment. When you mentioned the getting a seat at the bar, I thought, well, if my husband was on this right now, he would be making fun of me because I'm always like making sure we need to arrive at this time to make sure we still get a spot before everybody else starts flooding in.
100%. Who's going to get the table?
That's an excellent point because I think that is something that people do struggle with a lot.
Yeah. Who's going to get the table at 4:30
exactly.
so that we can all sit together?
And so then when you talked about the other, that's right. And when you talk about other experiences, I'm curious also, what about business, corporate retreats, anything like that? Do you see those very often?
So we do corporate retreats. The one thing I would tell you about, so like corporate retreats and incentive travel, you have to be very specific because, villas are homes. So there are homes like Hacienda Jaguar. I know I mentioned this a lot. That is very good for like a corporate retreat or an incentive. Why? Because all of the bedrooms are the exact same. They're all the same amenities. They're all the same size. The only differences are the views. Whereas there are other homes where, you might get, the master bedroom is this size, and then you have 3 other bedrooms that are a little bit smaller, and then you have 4 bedrooms that are very small. So you want to avoid that because if it's an incentive trip, you don't want them to go, well, clearly Pete had a really good year because look at the room he got.
Yeah.
But Bob, you need to work harder because you're in the bunk room. So you just want to make sure that you select the right villa for that. But we have many that fit that mode. Villa Padarosa is another example in Tuscany, a great place for a corporate retreat because, again, all of the bedrooms are kind of an equal size. I mentioned Jaguar. All the bedrooms are of an equal size. So everyone's getting, a similar. But we've done a lot of corporate retreats at Jaguar, which is a perfect one for it.
Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent point to make on the room sizes and, just making sure you're not using this incentive trip and making people mad. That would be a great deal. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So I'm curious right now across your portfolio, are you seeing any destinations trending at this time?
Yeah. So, I'll answer a different part of the question first, and then we'll go to destinations. So right now, and it always starts about February, but then really picks up as we start heading into the summer, is the holiday travel period, the people that plan in advance. So we're seeing a lot of that Christmas, New Year's time, especially for the bigger villas, because there's fewer of them. And especially New Year's, because New Year's is the more popular week of the two. So if clients are thinking about going away for the holidays, definitely now is the time to start talking to you, Melissa, because you have more options. Okay.
Yeah.
And don't think that you can't do, like, people always go, oh, Caribbean, Mexico. We do quite a bit in Europe because, it's a great place to go. We have heated villas. It's a beautiful time of year. So people do go there for the holidays as well. Now, getting into, specific destinations, the Caribbean is always very popular. Obviously, we're coming out of that cold winter period. So the Jamaicas, the Dominican Republic, St. Bart's, Barbados, all very, very, very popular. The reasons are very different. Because Dominican Republic and Jamaica tend to be great values. So you can do a villa with a full staff, which is included in the rate. And your food and beverage costs are very, very reasonable. So for example, in the Dominican Republic, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks prepared by a chef for you every day, because all of our villas do include that chef, you're looking at about $35 to $40 per person per day. You can't have breakfast in a luxury hotel for $40. Okay. Yeah. So the value is there. Same thing in Jamaica. It's a little bit more. It's about $80 in Jamaica. But then when you go to places like Barbados and St. Bart's and St. Martin, where there's lots of great restaurants, you have less people doing it in destination, but then you have the restaurants. So, it's going to be a little bit more costly, but again, more popular. Mexico was popular until we, hit that little divot during the year where we had some issues in Puerto Vallarta, but we're seeing it come back now. Not to where it should be, but it's coming back. But of course, now we're heading into spring and then into summer, which is Europe. Okay. Yeah. Europe is always very popular. Spain and Portugal are probably the two most up and coming. I did see today that actually, I think it was United Airlines is adding flights to Split in Croatia. I thought I saw United. Don't hold me to that one, but we do have amazing villas in Croatia. And if someone has never thought about going to Split, it is like the French Riviera, but probably, 1/3 the cost. And we have some incredible product there. And of course, Italy is Italy. I always, whether it's the Amalfi Coast, whether it's Tuscany, whether it's Sicily, whether it's the Lake District, Italy is an amazing villa destination for clients, and it's always extremely popular.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. We recently had a whole show on Italy and have one coming up soon on Croatia. Croatia is definitely a bucket list location right now for people. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. And the value, for what you're spending is absolutely incredible. But, for me, I take the food, the wine, and the people of Italy every time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. So I'm just curious if I know I had some things I wanted to ask, but is there anything else while you have our viewers, listeners here that you think that they really need to know about?
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress enough the importance of a travel advisor. And I know that's not where you thought I might be going. You thought I might be going to Villas of Distinction, but no, in all seriousness, I want to stress the value of a travel advisor. Yes, you can do it yourself, especially, villas, cruises. I mean, I know you want a travel advisor because you have the client's best interest at heart. You have the connections with people like us. You get the added values. So for instance, someone booking a villa through you, one of the values that we give you, Melissa, as you know, we give every client that books through you a $200 concierge credit that they can use, for concierge services. If they book that with us directly, they don't get that. Okay. They get it through you. You're there for them 24/7. You're making sure everything is working. In the event that there's an something happens with their airfare or their flights, you're on top of it. You're notifying us so that we can notify the people on the ground to let them know, so that everything continues to work smoothly. So for me, it's really bringing forward to your audience the value of a travel advisor. To me, you're invaluable. And that's what I would stress more than anything. Yes, we're a great company. Yes, we've been doing it for 37 years. Yes, we love them to do business through you with us. But more importantly, whether it's a cruise, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a African safari, whether it's, a villa booking, you are their best resource for that.
Well, thank you for that. And that really wasn't planned. I did not like ask him to say that or anything, but I appreciate that. I do think that I know that I fight for my clients. I know I take very good care of them. I know I really do care about them, and I want them to have a great experience. And I know that they see that because they keep coming back, which is wonderful. But I appreciate you acknowledging that as well, because I do think there's some people that think that the role of the travel advisor went away with the internet.
Nope.
They thought that, well, why do I need one? I can just go search for myself. But, you brought up some excellent points, and some points that I bring up quite often when people ask me, why do I need one?
Yeah. And, just to answer your real question about villas and villas of distinction, don't focus on the top number. Don't focus on, I have villas for $3,000 for a week. I have villas for $500,000 for a week. But really, how many bedrooms? What is your budget? And we will work within your budget to find the perfect villa for you. And then you take it down, to what is the per person cost versus, because if you get 5 hotel rooms, and each couple is going to be paying $3,000 to $5,000 for the week. Well, now you get a 5-bedroom villa, and that's $25,000 or $30,000. So I just want and understand that the value, when we talked about food and beverage and things like that, that's where you really get the big savings, because you're not paying, you're not paying $8 for a Michelob Ultra. You're not paying, $13 for a margarita. We're bringing, the actual cost of whatever that product costs to the villa. So it is a bottle of tequila, or it is a bottle of vodka, or it is a case of beer. So that's distributed based on the cost, not based on, elevated costs at a resort. So the value is incredible.
Well, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. I am guilty myself of seeing a big number and getting sticker shock, and I have to drill down. And so I think a lot of us are, but I think that that's a really great point to make, so that people really understand where the value lies with this. But Steve, I just thank you so much. This was great information. I think you guys do a really great job, and I wanted to make sure people knew you existed. And for anybody on that is interested in pursuing this, I'm here and I'm happy to help with that. But I think this was really great. So thank you again, Steve. I really appreciate your time today.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. And just remember, without a travel advisor, you're on your own.
Thank you for one last plug there, Steve. Okay, you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.